I think that's the mistake that all people make, let alone parents, which is thinking if I'm not doing it all, then I'm not doing it at all.
Right.
And the truth is that what we do on a daily basis, not just what we feed our kids, but what we do as parents on a daily basis, what they see us doing is creating the basis for what they know and what they constantly come back to.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Mom Does It All. I'm Marta Spurk, your host, triplet mom, health coach, and all things motivation extraordinaire. Let me ask you, are you tired of worrying about food, Mom? Stressing over what to make for you and your family, whether it's healthy enough or not? Are you just overwhelmed and could use a little help? Then this episode is for you. Today I'm going to be chatting with natural foods chef, podcaster, and mama, Amy Vig. She shares about her struggles with cooking and healthy nutrition and how she's found ways to simplify her life. So let's dive in. Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Marta, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, this is so fun. I'm so excited to learn from you. And I remember when we talked earlier, I loved how you said that your work right now came from all the realizations that you had in terms of, you know, the reality versus expectations with mom life and living a healthy lifestyle, cooking in a healthy way. Can you tell me a little bit more about that, these realizations?
Yeah, so I think to understand my realizations, it's important to know where I began, which is I had this health journey. It set me on this path. I went to a natural foods culinary program, and then I found myself in sort of my dream job of working at Whole Foods. So I was teaching customers and I was teaching team members, and this was all before I had kids. And because of where I had been on my own health journey, I had been gluten-free, I had been vegan, I had been low carb, I had been like all the things, right? And I'm sure that there's someone out there nodding because they've also done all the things for whatever reason. And it's a little bit embarrassing to think back now because I think about teaching sessions that I did with other folks at Whole Foods, and I'd be like, yeah, you know, you could buy crackers, but it's also super easy to make your own crackers and hummus. And like, yeah, exactly. Yes, it's super easy when you don't have a kid crawling up your leg.
Exactly.
By the time I left teaching at Whole Foods and went out on my own, I had an 18-month-old and my perspective had just like completely shifted because I think the truth is that if you have all the time to think about cooking and eating well and all of that, it looks very different than someone who has a super busy full-time job or has 3 kids or even has 1 kid.
Yeah.
And that really caused me to take a deeper look at like, where are places that I can streamline, still feel good about what I'm doing, feel like I'm doing as much as I can, but not hit that breaking point where I'm like, I couldn't possibly do this, so I won't try it all.
Right.
And I feel like that's a really important sweet spot for all of us to be able to find.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I wanted to ask you next is about this balance. Because even when you said, you know, whether you have 3 kids or 1 kid for me is, you know, that's why I really am looking forward to your tips because, to be honest, most of the cooking my husband does like for dinner and then we kind of eat leftovers for lunch. We've tried different techniques and different dynamics and this has worked best for us for now. But even with my sister, she has a 1-year-old and she is kind of going through this phase now that her baby's eating more solids. Like I was trying to make everything from scratch. I was trying to feed her the most, you know, the healthiest things. And then you kind of realize it's not how I thought, you know, reality versus expectation. So how did you find this balance? Can you walk us through kind of like your journey?
Yeah. I would say that my journey is a little bit unique in that I love cooking and I fully recognize that that is not every parent's reality.
Right.
So where I like to start from with most parents is that since that isn't most parents' reality, what I want to help you do is worry about food less. And to me, that looks like 2 things. One, it looks like not wondering what's for dinner every single night, right? Where you're like, oh, these kids need to eat again and cereal isn't an acceptable dinner. And 2, it looks like after you've fed them, you're not thinking like, oh, we really shouldn't have had that, right? So I think it's like a twofold stressor when it comes to food, and it's like short-term and long-term, and that makes it a little bit tricky. That said, I think places like Pinterest are really misleading, and I so feel for your sister when you're saying like she had this vision of cooking it all herself, because that was me, right? Like I made all my baby food from scratch with my first son, and then you hit like this breaking point and you're like, oh my gosh, now what do I do? That's something that I can actually feel good about doing long-term.
Yeah.
So in terms of like the actual logistics of getting dinner on the table, I have a couple of tips, and then we can like dive more into the defining for yourself what healthy looks like, because I think that's an important piece too. But when it comes to logistics, I would say be inspired by like probably a lot of people don't remember this, but like there was like Rachel Ray, and then there was this woman, Sandra something, who did like semi-homemade on Food Network. And I always like watched them and I was like, gosh, they like take so many shortcuts. But the truth is that we live in an amazing time, and there are so many shortcuts at our fingertips if we take the time to find them. So some of my favorites look like always having frozen vegetables on hand, frozen or fresh cauliflower rice that somebody else made, frozen fruit for smoothies, or even just for like defrosting and having. And I know that sounds like a lot of frozen things, but the truth is that sometimes these frozen things are actually fresher because they've been frozen at their peak of freshness. So there's no need to feel badly about them.
Right.
Other tricks is like, having a favorite whole grain or brown rice pasta, so that when pasta night comes around, you're not feeling like it's empty calories.
Right.
Picking out like a really clean sausage option, because sausage is essentially just like pre-seasoned meat if meat is something that you eat. And so it's a really easy thing to add in and add a lot of flavor. I have like a list of favorite sauces, things like Browse tomato sauce is like a really clean tomato sauce that I call it like better than I could ever make. Like it tastes better, and it's also cleaner than most anything else you find out there. And that having that arsenal of things gives you a place that you can really feel good about, that where you like reach into your pantry and you have things available to you for the nights where cooking everything with seasonal produce from your local farmer's market just isn't within your reality.
Right. And I love that, because I remember when we talked about before, you mentioned how we live at a time where we have all these things that didn't exist before, like the frozen cauliflower rice, the zoodles. And I love frozen stuff. I mean, that's what we live off of. I use frozen fruit for my shakes in the morning, and frozen vegetables because it's just easy and it's there. And it goes back to what you said, because sometimes we feel like, oh, it's so hard. I don't even want to start. I don't even want to try, because eating healthy is hard. And in reality, it really isn't.
Yeah.
You just have to find these little hacks like what you mentioned.
I think that's the mistake that all people make, let alone parents, which is thinking, if I'm not doing it all, then I'm not doing it at all.
Right.
And the truth is that what we do on a daily basis, not just what we feed our kids, but what we do as parents on a daily basis, what they see us doing, is creating the basis for what they know and what they constantly come back to. And so I don't want to put a ton of pressure on it, because I think eating should be fun and delicious and all of those things. But even if it just means like eating more vegetables, if that's the first place that you can go, is like, I'm going to try to add a vegetable to every meal that I have today, and also to my kids. And even if they don't eat it, I know that I put it on their plate. That is a really important place to start. And it doesn't need to be bigger than that. It doesn't need to be keto and paleo and gluten-free and like all of the buzzwords, because the truth is the people who I see that live the healthiest lives for the longest amounts of time, meaning they are healthy eating as their like normal, not as their exception when they go on a diet or a program. Those people are really simple in what they do. They aren't 100%. And listen, I know that there are exceptions to the rule. Like everyone's thinking like, oh, but I know so-and-so. Yes, you know so-and-so, and they are an exception, and they work really hard, no doubt, at what they're doing. But for the rest of us who have like a million other things we want to do, but we have this nagging thing that tells us we should be feeding our family better, and we want to eat better as parents, keeping it really simple is the way to make the biggest long-term change because it's something you'll actually keep doing.
Mm-hmm. And that's key there, because sometimes when you start, you go all in, then it's not sustainable. So then it's really not worth it. I mean, it might help you change habits here and there, but it's not going to work long term. And your kids are going to notice that too, right?
Yes.
Doing something for a little bit and not keeping up with that. They're like masters at noticing the things that we don't do that we tell them that we need to do.
I know kids like find those weaknesses and just like wedge their tiny little fingers into them. You know, they're like, what if I try this?
Even like with the smallest things, like you need to close the cabinet. You always tell them you need to close the cabinet. And then when you don't, they're like, you need to close the cabinet or whatever, you know, like pointing out for the stuff. And I'm sure they're going to be noticing in terms of nutrition too. And it is a lot of pressure for parents, especially nowadays. Like we have all of these things that are great for us that we mentioned, you know, the pre-made things that are healthy, but at the same time, it's a lot of pressure for us to follow this healthy path. And so and we talked about what is healthy enough, because, you know, you make these simple choices, you have these things handy at home, but how about the processed foods or the candies and things? How do you kind of like introduce those things? Because they're going to be introduced.
Yes.
How do you do that and not feel like you're at an imbalance or feel good about those decisions, I guess?
Yeah. So I would say that there are two ways that I've done that in my life, and that if I were like telling somebody how to do it, that I would tell them to do. The first thing is to like really sit down and think about what is most important to you. So if eating 100% clean is most important to you, then it's important to be really honest about that. But it's also important to be really honest about what impacts that's going to have on your life. Meaning, what does that look like in terms of how I need to cook for my family? What does it mean about how I need to plan for my family? What does it mean about how we're social as a family? Mm-hmm. For me, and for my family, like food experiences are really important. And not thinking about food is also really important. And so 100% clean is not for us. What it does look like is that I have like a general plan for the week at the beginning of the week. I go to the store and I buy those things. The plan often changes because life happens. And I think that's where like essential cooking skills really comes in. And that's why I'm so passionate about teaching them. But I would say like having those things on hand, I'm like, okay, I have a bunch of zucchini. I'm going to do something with it, even if it's not the plan that I had, right? Mm-hmm. For my family, healthy enough looks like whole grains most of the time, vegetables at lunch and dinner every day, even if my kids don't eat them, there is a vegetable offering. Some sort of fruit in the morning, snacks that I can control, like snacks that are when they're with me, are things that are like pretty balanced. Like I'll try to have like some whole grain crackers and some hummus and maybe some cheese and some vegetables and those kinds of things, and being really intentional about what those things look like. Mm-hmm. And the reason I do all of that is because when we go out to a friend's birthday party, I want to not think about it at all. Right. Like if all you eat is pepperoni pizza and cake and drink lemonade, then like that's fine because I know I've taken care of the other 80% to 99% of the time, right? Mm-hmm. When we go out to dinner, I'm not telling you have to order broccoli because, like, by the way, I don't want to order broccoli when we go out to dinner either. Like, I want to eat whatever's delicious. Mm-hmm. Not that broccoli is not delicious, but you know what I mean? Like, whatever's there and calling to me. And so I would say that's the first thing, is to really take a hard look at what's realistic for your family and what you can feel good about, and try to sit in that place most of the time when you're in control, so that when you're not in control, you don't need to worry quite as much. Right. And I get that there are like certain things, like kids have a gluten allergy or something like that, and you have to be more strict. So obviously that looks a little bit different. But I think the starting point is the same for all of us, which is like just taking a minute to decide what's right for you, not what somebody told you should be right for you.
I love that. Yes. Because everyone's different. Every family's different. Every kid's different. There are so many factors. So
yes.
You have to decide what you're going to do and come up with a game plan.
Yes, absolutely.
And I love what you had said about essential cooking skills. What are those?
Oh man. Okay. So I didn't learn to cook when I was growing up. This is the truth. So there's someone out there who's like, my mom didn't teach me how to cook and now I'm at a disadvantage. I didn't learn how to cook when I was growing up. I wasn't interested in it. It was part of my family, but not like a central part of what we did as a family. So all hope is not lost if you don't have these yet. I would say like essential cooking skills are really basic chopping skills. I'm not talking like French fancy chopping skills. Like none of that matters. You're not a professional chef and no one's going to slap your hand if you get it wrong. But the reality of cooking is that like chopping things is a big part of the amount of time that it takes us to get dinner on the table. Right. And so I'm super passionate about helping parents just know how to do things the fastest. So the other day I did a Facebook Live showing people how I cut a melon. And a couple of folks were like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this wrong my whole life. Well, you haven't been doing it wrong. You've been doing it the way you're doing it and you got melon on the table. So it's right. But it's maybe not as fast and clean and easy and efficient as it could be. And it's so funny because I know you talk to folks about this is like in our business lives and even in our fitness lives, we think a lot about efficiency. But we don't often take the time to reflect on like, where could we be more efficient in the kitchen? Where are we like in this modern age of all of this technology relying just on like what we've always done in the kitchen space? So definitely chopping skills is number one. And then number two, I would say is like knowing what to keep in your pantry to have like healthy options at your fingertips. And we talked a little bit about that earlier. But I think like a well-stocked pantry is the most powerful tool in putting a healthy dinner on the table anytime you need it, even if you're lacking inspiration and a plan. Exactly. And then I would say like the third thing is just knowing some basic recipes by heart. And usually parents make those be like the things that their family ends up loving. What a lot of them then do is fall back only on those. And I would say that like, that's where you need to like be a little creative and say like, okay, now I know how to make a stir fry. That's essentially sauteing vegetables. That applies in a lot of other ways. If I got a little bit creative with what's in my pantry and with my chopping skills, and it could look different all the time instead of saying like, it's stir fry night, guys. And then I have parents who come to me all the time and are like, my family's so tired of eating the same 5 things because that's all I make.
Yeah, that's usually how it goes. And you talked about this when we chatted earlier, how to, I forget exactly what it was, but with different ingredients or the same ingredients, make different meals, or from the same meal, make different meals. What was that?
Yeah. So it's like essentially like if you know anything about a capsule wardrobe plan, I know that there are some folks who are really on board with this, where you have like 30 different pieces of clothing. Listen, fashion is not my area. So like you have however many pieces of clothing and you combine them in different ways to make different outfits, right? And I have this like idea that I'm working on. So it's not even available yet, but I have this idea that I'm working on of like how to combine things in different ways to make different meals. So it could look like, a sheet pan meal of like sausage. I made this the other day. It was like sausage roasted with onions and bell peppers and served with pesto. So it was kind of like an Italian sheet pan dish. Right. But there's no reason I couldn't have taken those really similar ingredients, but put tomato sauce on them and throw them in pasta and cook them in a pan. And it would have been like a sausage pasta meal, right? And for some folks, this is going to sound like so basic, but the truth is we're making it too hard to eat healthy. Like we're feeling like everything needs to be so creative and so interesting. And smoothies are like 12 layered smoothies with like 15 kinds of nut butter. And it's like, I'm sorry, just like a smoothie will do.
Right. Yeah. Keeping it simple. I love that.
Yes. Eat the fruit, eat the vegetables, eat the whole grains, move on with your life. Like you have better things to do. And this is coming from me, and like food is my life. But you just have better things to do than worry about food. Yeah.
Because it just makes us overwhelmed. And then whenever we're overwhelmed, we're most likely going to make not the healthiest choices because we're like, screw this.
Yes. And not to mention stress is so bad for you. So it's like, I see so many people who get so wrapped up in this healthy eating space and healthy living in general, right? That it becomes their life. They're so stressed out. And then that isn't serving them either.
No.
And it's like, you're undoing all your hard work.
Right. And it goes back to, I've been talking a lot about mom guilt, and it kind of is the same thing. You think that by worrying, you're making things better, but in reality, you're not. So keeping it simple is always the best, especially for moms, since we already have so much going on as it is.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love what you said, and I'm going to repeat it just so I remember it. It's like, we think that worrying is making it better, and it's not. And that's like the truest thing is like, how can we just move forward away from the worry because we both feel good about what we're doing. Like we feel like it's as much as we can do, or it's as much as we want to do. And we just like know that we've thought about it, we've done what we can, and now we have to move on with our lives because there are other things to be taken care of.
Right. And also it goes back to being honest with what you can do, right? Because if you're thinking that, I have to cook 3 different meals every single day, that's unrealistic. That's for most people, experience. So you just don't even have to go there. So how can I do this in a more simple way?
Yeah.
And this is what you're all about.
And it sounds like you guys have really nailed that with your, like, we're going to make dinner and then we're going to eat the leftovers for lunch. Like that is a viable strategy. And this whole, like, everyone's into meal prep and all of these things and spending hours at the beginning of the week. And for a while, I thought that might be the answer for parents. And then trying it myself, I realized, I don't have a couple hours at the beginning of the week. And frankly, if I do, it's not what I want to spend my time doing.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do we keep it really simple? And by the way, like a sandwich on whole grain bread is not an unacceptable lunch option for kids or for adults.
Right.
And I think we've like made it too complicated.
Yeah, we totally did. Yeah, because of all the other things that have come out recently, you start thinking what was healthy isn't healthy anymore because there are different ways of looking at it, right?
Totally.
So if you're vegan and if you have intolerances, right? So, but then it kind of like you fall into this trap of one size fits all. And it's not like this at all. Everyone has a lifestyle and things that they find acceptable. Like, some people say, I'm never going to eat bread again. I'm not one of those people and I'm okay with that.
Right. And if it's not a sandwich, it's like, a rice bowl or something, like something that's really simple. And by the way, if you look at like traditional cultures, a lot of them were eating these things that we're talking about now. Like this is not so complicated, even though it feels it. And I just want to say one thing because you brought it up for me is like something that comes up a lot when I'm talking to folks is like, well, goldfish, like my kids love goldfish. Like so do mine. Goldfish are delicious. I also love goldfish. I mean, they make whole grain goldfish. So if your switch is as simple as looking for the whole grain ones and buying those, like that's enough too.
Right. And if it gives you peace of mind, right, then do that.
Yes. And that's not to say that like goldfish should be for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but like you already know that.
Yeah.
Right. Like you already know that. So make a simple switch when they eat it a few times a week, feel good about the option that you've given them, that they're getting something nutritious with it, and just move on with your life.
And even to think about how that affects them by seeing that we're not so obsessed with it and it's just something natural and normal. It's just part of life and we're not obsessed about what we're eating. I mean, that's a lot healthier for them than if they know, oh, my mom's always worried about this, and that, right?
Yes.
And she's always...
That's such a good point. And what about like those food battles? Like what message are we giving them by saying like, you have to eat broccoli because it's something you wouldn't otherwise eat unless I, as your parent, told you that you had to.
Yeah.
And that stuff, like kids pick up on that. You said that earlier and it's so true.
It is. Yeah. So it's just, and they're going to watch what you're eating too. And I feel like that has been a huge change for me as well in thinking, my kids have to eat vegetables because I want them to be healthy, but I wasn't even eating them that much either. So it's like, it makes you definitely take a hard look at yourself, like what you're saying, and deciding to be honest with yourself, what you want to do, and not just want them to do something and you're going to do something, because that doesn't work. Everyone needs to be doing something similar. Otherwise, they're not going to follow what you're saying for sure.
Absolutely. I think that's such an important point. And it's like, even for me, it's been like, hey, I don't want my kid to eat this. Like, why am I having that?
Yeah.
It is like, they can be a real wake-up call for us. And I think that can be a gift if we approach it in the right way.
Definitely. And so in terms of all the amazing resources that you have, obviously helping moms figure out ways of using the same ingredients for different meals, like what you're saying, or even prepare. Oh, and we mentioned about meal prep and how you decided that that's not realistic for you. And I've decided that's not realistic for me either.
Thank you.
And, I mean, everyone's different. Again, I know moms that work full time out of the house. And so that works for them because they take their lunches with them and things like that. So everyone's different. But it goes back to what we said in the beginning, right? There's not like, let's lay the law. This is what everyone needs to do to be healthy. It's not how it works. You have to figure it out. So what are some of the resources that you have, or maybe some extra tips that people can find on your website? And you also have your podcast.
Yeah. So that I don't forget, because, I do have mom brain. It's a real thing. I want to mention first, like, yes, meal prep doesn't work for me, but I do have this technique of what I think of as like meal prep light, which is like really easy things you can do at the beginning of the week, even while you're making like Sunday night dinner. Okay. And one of those things is making mason jar salads, which I'm huge into. I have a couple of different website recipes on my website, cookingwithafullplate.com. Okay. And there's like this kale feta one that's super awesome because it's packed with kale and it has beans and it has feta cheese, which like what, you can't argue with that. And it also has brown rice. So it's really balanced. And the awesome thing about mason jar salads, and there's a million on the internet, so you can just search for them too if you don't care whose recipe it is like mason jars are the perfect way to layer the ingredients for a salad so that they stay fresh for like 3 to 4 days at a time.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So on Sunday, you can literally like put dressing, and then I think of it as like things that can marinate, like your vegetables and your beans, and then your greens, and then whatever like topping, like nuts or cheese or that kind of thing goes on top. And when you're ready to eat it, you shake it, and it's like a meal all together. And I think this idea of having like adult lunches ready, because we think about kids' lunches so often,
right?
But having your lunches ready, taking care of yourself. Even for me, like I'll bring it to the gym, and then when we're leaving to go pick up my other son, I'll have something instead of being like, I guess I'll just eat this bar again.
Right.
For lunch is such a powerful change that takes not even 10 minutes at the beginning of the week to prepare. And I with my husband to work. So it's like a win-win that we're both getting healthier things. So I would say that's one thing.
Okay.
2 is I have a post on 5 tips for chopping faster. So if you heard me say like essential kitchen skills and you got scared and you thought like, I don't think I have those, then let me help you. So it's 5 tips for chopping faster, again, on Cooking with a Full Plate. And I'll send you those links so that you can include them in the show notes too for folks who want to find them.
Awesome.
I am always sharing lots of tips and tricks on my Facebook page. That's where I'm most active and most like present if people have questions. And that's just Cooking with a Full Plate, like everything else. And then if you're interested in exploring this conversation in more detail around what does healthy eating look like and how are other people doing it and how much do people spend on their groceries on a weekly basis when they are doing this and all of those things, that all happens on my podcast, A Very Full Plate. You can find it on like wherever your podcast playing happens. You know, it's different for everybody, but it's A Very Full Plate. And I'm super excited because we're also next month or this month when this airs, starting to do some expert interviews. So it will be around things like picky eating or fitness for parents. And so if you're interested in like really diving in depth and doing it on your own time, which is what I love about podcasts like yours, that you can listen while you're taking your kids places.
Yeah.
Really hearing about all of those kinds of things, then A Very Full Plate, the podcast, would be a really cool spot to
and it's geared toward parents mostly, right?
Yeah. So we call it Real Food Talk with Real Parents. I love to say that it's like for all parents. So if you have a husband who you need to help get on board with picky eating or healthy eating in your family in general, then it can be kind of a fun way to just get on the same page without having to do the legwork yourself.
That's perfect. I love all the resources. So much information. Thank you so much. This was great. And I'll add the details about all the links and everything so that people can contact you. And you're also in our community. So you can people can connect with you there as well at momdoesitall.community. Thank you so much, Amy. This was so much fun.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed our chat and got excited about implementing Amy's tips. I sure did. And remember, Mama, life is overwhelming on its own. You don't have to create more overwhelm for yourself. to simplify and reduce the stress. And don't forget to connect with Amy through the links on the episode's details. And if you haven't already, please leave us a review on iTunes. Talk next week. Bye-bye.